I'm not going to call this month Reindeer Month or give it a theme, but I feel like going on a reindeer kick anyway, because why not? This isn't species biased at all, no siree. I only pick the finest films to review, as you do once you're a YouTube reviewer like me with almost 400 subscribers. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. The movie. Yeah, so apparently someone wanted to one-up the old 1960s stop-motion classic, because this isn't just some TV movie that gets shown every Christmas as per tradition. Oh no, this is a movie with actual theatrical releases and such talent as John Goodman and Whoopi Goldberg. Unfortunately, it bombed at the box office, so we might as well explore why, right? How does this film interpret the classic tale? How did it end up doing poorly in theaters? And, ultimately, in case you didn't know the story of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, let's go all the way back to 1931. Robert L. May creates the fable of a young reindeer born with a nose that magically shines red, which, while scrutinized as if a physical deformity, ends up helping Santa Claus during a harsh winter. This story is helped published by Montgomery Ward, a home living and apparel-based department store brand. Robert's brother-in-law, Johnny Marks, writes a song about the fable, gets Gene Autry to sing it, and there's also an 8-minute animated short based on the booklet.
Go on home, Red Nose. Your mama's calling you.
And then the 1960s made-for-TV film is made, and watching that again recently, I'm sure it's fine for kids, but I have a feeling that it hasn't aged well after all these years. But we're not here to talk about that, though I will be comparing the two, obviously. Now, in this version of the fable, I have a hard time calling it a fable since it's only been around since 1939. Whatever. Rudolph is the son of Blitzen and nephew of Comet, Cupid, and Dasher, rather than just being Donner's son, and his mother is named Mitzi instead of just Mrs. Donner. I'm glad she has an actual name this time. Originally, Rudolph wasn't related to any of the established 8 reindeer, the ones you know, just some buck that happened to have a weird nose, but I guess giving him a family adds to his character. It's that classic father-son relationship where the dad wants to look decent and well-adjusted while also having a son that, supposedly, are not those things. In the 1960s version, it's a lot more bleak, with Rudolph getting exiled and disowned by Santa himself the first time he tries to join these reindeer games, but in the 1998 version, it's treated just like general bullying that Rudolph just has to endure. I don't know which is worse, but neither really show the glowing nose being an actual problem to their society. It's just different, weird, not normal. I realize that's the point, but that's not very compelling, is it? It'd be more interesting to see someone struggle with their uniqueness in a way that does impede on what matters to them and not just, they look funny. I think that's the main problem with this 1998 adaptation. It doesn't fix any of the problems from the other versions, and it basically tells a more mediocre, possibly worse story. For example, in the 1964 version, you have 2 plucky companions for Rudolph. You have Hermie, an effeminate elf that wants to pursue dentistry rather than toy making. By the way, did you brush your teeth today? Just thought I'd remind you. And the pickaxe-crazy Yukon Cornelius, both of which are developed characters like Rudolph with their own personalities and desires and stuff. In the 1998 version, you get a sneaky Arctic fox and a bear. Just, you know, a friendly bear. Nothing special about him. I can't even remember what all he does in this movie other than act like wallpaper, but more on that later. John Goodman does an okay job as Santa Claus, but it sounds more like John Goodman as Santa Claus rather than just Santa Claus. And Whoopi Goldberg as the big bad villain, I know she's probably trying her best, but this Ice Queen is very wishy-washy in whether she wants to be self-aware or just plain sassy, rather than a weird mix of both. Think a toned-down knockoff version of Hades or Storm King. The music isn't something I would write home about either. We start out with Clint Black, for some reason a late 80s to early 90s country artist doing a cover of the old tune.
Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer had a very shiny nose.
Makes me wonder if they wanted to do a version of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer in the sticks. Other than that, you have songs sprinkled here and there, all festive and show-tuney sounding, and then suddenly...
The moon is right, the spirit's up, we're here tonight.
Paul McCartney shows up. The song is never featured again, by the way, so yeah, that was a thing. They also couldn't find a matching singing voice for Rudolph either, which is odd because Kathleen Barr, who plays Rudolph, can totally sing.
Gosh, I never knew I was unique.
I'm out here on my own to face the day alone. I need you.
I haven't talked much about the animation because there really isn't much to talk about. Just sort of looks like generic 90s animation like you would find on a cheap made-for-TV special, except it had a $10 million budget, which they only made like 1% back at the box office for this. So you see what I mean when I say this is a more mediocre version of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer? On to spoilers. Skip ahead to this point in the video to avoid spoilers, and hang on tight if you don't care. One of the most damning things about this movie is the reindeer games themselves. So, get this, not only is Rudolph's rival caught playing dirty, and not only is Rudolph disqualified for his justified winning of the race, which his dad sticks up for him as well, but Santa himself, the head honcho of this competition, didn't think to veto the back-asswards exception that this lowly little elf referee calls.
That's just not fair.
But Mama, the judge has the final decision, not us.
You run this show! This is your holiday! The worst part is, he likes Rudolph as well. Unlike the 1964 version where Santa is like, nah man, this guy is a complete freak. Cover that nonsense, nose up. He has a one-on-one with him, song including, telling him to believe in himself and crap, but oh no, can't argue with the ref on this call. Oh, onto another smaller detail. Was the fact that the Arctic Fox sleeps with a teddy bear and sucks on his thumb a point of comedy or just some point of weakness to his character? I figure it's both, but this movie is about not being terrible to people or beings different from you, so I'm not sure if this movie is laughing at or sympathizing with him. And I don't think the big bad Ice Queen's heel turn was that well thought out. They just suddenly give her a second chance, like, did it not occur to these characters that she could turn on them and catch them off guard? That's kind of a trope. I mean, she didn't do that, but she could have. There is more I could complain about, but I don't want to make this too long. Overall, a pretty weak movie in my opinion. They probably try to cover up their flaws by grabbing some popular talent along with some fabulous Canadian voiceover actors like Kathleen Barr and my main man Matt Hill, the Edis of Eds with 1D. But acting talent doesn't usually mean automatic success. Gotta try a little bit harder in other departments to do that. But now comes the more important question. How furry is it? Let's examine this Christmas tale using my C.H.A.N.C.E system, a handy rubric I use to break down furry aspects in media, those being cast, harmony, anthropocentrism, narrative, commonality, and expression. Let's start with cast, or how many narratively important characters that are furry. There's noticeably more emphasis on the reindeer population, which is probably a plus towards its furriness compared to the other more well-known Rudolph movie. I mentioned the Arctic Fox and Bear companions, but they're so flat as characters that I don't think I consider them narratively important. You could have the whole movie without them, really. But since they're side characters, I guess I'll include them. We also have Zoe, the love interest, and not much else to her. So that's her, Rudolph and his family, the companions, Santa, Ice Queen, Penguin Butler, and her pet wolves. Seems almost like an anthro majority, so let's call it 3 out of 4. Next is harmony, or how natural the furries are to the setting. This is a magical land of the North Pole, so anthropomorphic animals aren't out of the question. Outside of Santa and his wife, I don't think we see a single human either, just a bunch of reindeer, elves, and some other furries here and there. Oh, and I guess those sprites are in the movie too. Although they're more like the chorus in ye old Greek drama, the kind you read about in high school and all that. You know, they're there to comment on the current situation and sing a few tunes. Although I think they help out Rudolph in a couple of ways. Anyway, 4 out of 4 for harmony. Moving on to anthropocentrism, or how close these furries are to being human. It depends on the character, really. The bear and the fox are standing on two legs and act more anthropomorphic than the reindeer do. And you also have Ice Queen's butler penguin, because apparently she needs one of those. Well, I want one too, but that's another story entirely. It's a bit tricky to judge because the four-legged folk are more like a 2 on the scale, and the two-legged beings are closer to a 3 or 4. Since there's an even split of 4 and two-legged furries, let's split it down the middle and call it 2.5 out of 4. And next is narrative, or how important these furries' animal nature is to this movie. I'm not sure if being a reindeer is entirely important to the core narrative. It's not so much reindeerness, as in the state of being a reindeer, that drives the story forward, as it is Rudolph's red glowing nose and the conflict it causes and eventually solves, once Rudolph and Santa find its true purpose. It's still pretty relevant and major that Rudolph as a reindeer aids Santa and the other reindeer along the sleigh, and that he's shunned from his kin for having the physical abnormality, but I don't think being a reindeer is the main focus. Again, more of a nose story than a reindeer story, but a good mix of both. His species being a key dynamic makes this a 3 out of 4. Then we have commonality, or how prevalent anthros are outside of the main cast. As mentioned before, we have a mix of two-legged and four-legged furries in this film. And that includes our supporting cast and background randos. If not for the elves and Santa and Ice Queen, I think I would call this a perfectly furry cast. And there's nothing wrong with having human characters in an otherwise furry work. I'd even call it necessary, considering this is based around a fat, bearded old guy's jolly holiday. I'm content with calling this a 3 out of 4. Finally, we have expression, or how furry they actually look. I'd wager that the four-leggers and the two-leggers have around the same amount of anthropomorphism in terms of physique. What I mean by that is that they look fairly close to their original animal counterparts, but still stylized and cartoonified enough for an animated movie like this. You can tell whether it's a reindeer or an Arctic fox, even when they sometimes speak and walk around like people do. Or, you know, like furries. A good 3 out of 4 for this quality. After a tally of each score, we have a total of 18.5 out of 24. So while this 1998 adaptation might have a more furry quality than the more well-known version of this tale, it's not really better in terms of entertainment. It just seems like they didn't try that much to make it stand out on its own, especially since they had the resources and the gall to put this in theaters.
Show us the light, Rudolph! Show us the light. You can do it! I did it! I did it! Oh, gosh! Wait, come back!
I've seen worse, don't get me wrong, but I'm still waiting for a version of this story that puts a decent spin on the tale. My opinion, stick with the 1940s short or the 1960s TV movie version. This has been Gregor, John Gooddeer Reindeer, with How Furry Is It? Click on the like button if you enjoyed what you saw, and subscribe and hit the bell icon if you want to see more anthro analysis and antler antics. And since you're still here, go ahead and check out my Patreon page. Patreon lets you pay creators like me directly through a monthly paid subscription, and if you're generous enough, you can even have your name in the credits before each review, or help me co-produce a review. I also have a special Discord server for my patrons, but you can also send me single donations through Ko-fi, that's Ko-Fi. And as always, thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.